like and subscribe. Now, what are some red flags for teachers that scream drop this class immediately? Professor claimed she didn't allow people to step out of class to use the bathroom. You're all adults, not children. You can hold it. Exactly, lady. We're adults. We paid to be here and adults have to use the bathroom. 2-hour in class pre-recorded PowerPoint lectures from 2008 because it saves time for me. And please don't ask questions until after the end of my PowerPoint. This was in 2017. Personal experience. I literally dropped 4 classes my sophomore year. Prior to starting the classes, the disability department contacted all of my teachers to tell them that I'm deaf and that I would need some form of written/typed paper to follow along with lectures. I'm completely deaf. Sit closer. I can't give you special treatment. Technically, you have to give special treatment or reasonable accommodations. Smells like a lawsuit. I haven't quite finalized the course org and grading, so I'll be adjusting them as we go along. Surprise assignments, surprise tests, way too many group projects. I should have known. Class of 80 averages a 40% on a test, prof. That's what they get for not learning the material. I took an economics course and bombed the first test. I went to the professor and told her I really want to do well in your class. What are some suggestions you might have on how I can be successful? She looked at the grade on the test and said you should drop the class and change your major. I maybe should economics, but I can follow instructions. Something similar happened to me too. I bombed my first calc test, and when I went to the TAR asking what I could do to at least pass, he told me nothing. Just drop. You'll never pass with a score like that. I was even like, can I come to your office hours? And he said no, just drop, and walked away. Lol. I didn't, cause I'm stubborn, and got help from my engineering buddies and ended up with a B thanks to Curve. When the first thing they say before reading the 2-page 1.0 spaced syllabus is, I've been teaching for X years, so I deserve your respect or something like that. That's basically a 100% accurate indicator that this person cannot be wrong, and they will talk to you like you're a piece of sh. They can't earn anybody's respect, so they have to ransom it. Tenured organic chemical prof. Any questions? 50 hands go up. Prof. It's a fairly simple concept, so you backquote lines get there. Let's move on. Then a week later, I'm very disappointed by your exam scores, especially question X. That was answered incorrectly by %83 of the class. No laptops, all code will be handwritten. Yes, that really happened. Absolutely barbaric. When they read the PowerPoints word for word, I can point, do, point, that, point at, point home. Teach PLS. The term is PowerPoint karaoke. The use of McGraw-Hill Connect, if the class isn't absolutely necessary. Really, most online assignment system bullsh. Haven't used McGraw-Hill, but it's probably on par with Pearson's mastering crap. Sure, you can Google/check all the answers, so you don't waste any points. But it's awful if you try to do it the honest way, especially for physics. Use a different, but valid, method and get .001 off. Wrong. The Pearson system is insultingly bad, especially after using Cengage's mildly okay system. Click to open the module. Click to access text. That opens a new window with a hyperlink to text. Just ridiculous. These books are required for the class. I wasn't able to get the revision into the bookstore in time, so the only place you can get them is from me directly or from my website. I will warn you, if you don't buy the books you won't get the login information to be able to take the final, which is 90% of your grade. Oh, and no, I can't accept financial aid for them, but it's only $250, so it's not a big deal. Never seen an entire class get up 5 minutes in and leave before. Lol, nice. This is the reaction so many of these professors here need. Good day to you, sir. I thought it was illegal to force students to purchase something that can only be purchased from a school or teacher. I'm not sure if it's against an actual law, but any decent university in Australia would definitely have a policy that would not allow this. Plus, any text required for a class must be available in the university library, with at least one non-loanable copy, so students can make copies of it. Sorry, take notes. Probably not, but the school would probably be interesting in how he didn't get the revision in on time, and how you can only buy it from him, and how he won't take financial aid. This all means that the university isn't getting their share and everyone wants their share. I had a professor that in hindsight I really should have dropped. It was a Western civilization history class, and the first day the entirety of the class he spent talking about how he missed his old job teaching in Europe, because American students are more lazy and incapable of getting as high of grades. Then he showed intro YouTube videos from his personal laptop, hooked to a projector, and all of the recommend videos all had titles like Grinding with Thong, Sexy College Babe Grinding, etc. I thought he was just eccentric, but the guy was easily the worst teacher I ever had. He would expect you to totally memorize all the chapter. He would quiz on material that didn't matter for concepts, i.e., what was the name of Caesar's second cousin, when the information would be found in a huge family tree. The only students in the class with A's were women, and he would grade their quizzes differently and be much more lenient. The students compared quiz results. Someone in class called him out, and he said that he was tired of teaching Americans and doesn't get paid enough. Literally, had a prof like this, he was eventually fired for sexual misconduct, presumably with a student. Total dick. Nothing of value was lost. Recommend videos all had titles like Grinding with Thong, Sexy College Babe Grinding, etc. This is gold. I hated when they quizzed on ridiculous inconsequential material. Lazy tactic, and sometimes I suspect the tactic of a professor who doesn't really know the material to begin with. I don't need to tell you what Rommel's dog's name is. It is more important that I can understand the importance of this man and the history of WWII. Pride in the difficulty of their course. If everyone fails, it's not for an inability to learn, but for an inability to teach. I had a French professor like this. She gave us so much homework that I had a couple of hours a night of French homework and 3 other classes that were more important to my major. She handed back the homework the first week and dropped the bombshell on us that she was marking us down for any mistakes that she saw we had already erased and corrected ourselves on. Even if the final answer was the correct one, she marked it as if we'd turned in the wrong answer. If she could see eraser marks, this wasn't some advanced class. This was goddamn French I. I wasn't in the first wave to drop. Finally, it was between barely scraping by this class and passing my biochem class, so I dropped, but too late to get a refund. She bragged every time someone dropped and ridiculed students who answered incorrectly. It was a really toxic learning environment. This class will be using a textbook that I'm writing and editing during the semester. Translation: it's going to be amateur hour. In addition to trying to learn new stuff, you are paying the school for the privilege of proofreading your professor's book. See, I thought this until I took a course called Archaeology of the Ancient Near East with a retired/adjunct professor. The book was $25 and he wrote it himself. Each page had pictures of the topic, and it was written in simple language. He also, however, spent half of each page citing sources and making references. It was the most insightful and one of the best textbook reads I've had. It made a 3-hour night class much more exciting. I think it also helped that the professor has taught the class for years, is the curator of our university's small museum, and actually enjoys what he's teaching though. My favorite professors are the ones that are in love with what they teach. You can tell by the way they teach that they care deeply about the subject and want the students to care as well. I took a class with a teacher that was translating a book from Sanskrit to English. It was completed already, but in reading her early version, she would clarify the translation when questions arose. It was a wonderful process, intriguing to hear the thought process of different word choice. That actually sounds interesting, and maybe an exception to the general consensus. Day 1 of grad school for electrical engineering. Multivariable Laplace transforms. Everyone takes their seats and professor smiles and says in a thick Russian accent, "Disforstklasitage." Okay. Had a drawing professor that put a stack of pre-signed withdrawal forms on his desk. Told us to grab one when we were ready. This is drawing class, not withdrawing class. I'd love to see the face when half the class gets up and takes one, saying "I've heard enough." Probably a self-satisfied smirk. Wow, I didn't realize the US Marines were teaching drawing classes now. No, they aren't allowed anymore. Kept eating the crayons. think that their students should only focus on this particular class for the upcoming semester, as if they should spend all their time on it. Had a prof ask, show of hands, how many of you are taking other classes? And when people raised their hands said, that was a mistake. Then said, how many of you have jobs? That was a mistake. I think enrolling in that class was a mistake. I guess being poor is also a mistake. Gives a test on the first day that will be counted against you. Had one of my mathematics teachers do this. The required textbook is a saran wrapped package of loose leaf papers that cost $100, authored by the professor. When the teacher doesn't even explain anything, he just goes on YouTube and shows the class a video and everyone is left without a clue of what is going on. I dropped computer science because of this, and I'm glad that I did. Also, when the teacher hardly ever explains anything and insists on independent research, more like I can't be asked preparing lessons, so just go ahead and do it yourself. Too many people got A's last semester, so I'm changing my syllabus for you all. Cut to the next semester. Too many people dropped at the beginning of last semester, so I'm changing my syllabus for you all. I'm altering the syllabus. Pray I don't alter it any further. Back when I started college, I got straight A+S in a class, but when I went to check on my overall grade, I had a B+. Found it odd, and went to question my teacher about it. He said that he dropped down my grade because the class was a bit of a pain in the A. He didn't use those exact words, but that's what he meant. Then I questioned him again about my posture, asking if I did anything wrong, or disturbed class, or whatever. He promptly said I didn't, and that I was a great student, which made me ask again why is grade lower then. He told the same excuse from above. Then I asked if he was planning on changing my grade at all, since I had only A's, and he promptly said he wasn't going to change. Fast forward a few days, I ended up filing a complaint about him and his method of grading students, and the college made him change my grade. After that he approached me and said something like, hey you/4 sis, you didn't have to file a complaint about me. I was gonna fix you grade yada yada. That's really stupid. Of course he'd say that after you complained. Exactly. That's what pissed me off the most. He spent the next few months being somewhat nice after that. That's infuriating. A really good tip after you meet with a professor or anyone in person is to send them an email detailing what you talked about. Hey Professor Ditch, just sending a follow-up email in regards to what we discussed during your office hours. From what I understand, you have lowered my grade due to the actions of other members of my class and will not be raising it, despite the fact that I have all A's on class assignments and quizzes. Can you please confirm that this is the case, or for any other interaction really? It leaves a paper trail for you to reference later if an issue ever comes up. An even better tip is to actually address them as Professor Ditch in the email. I'll make the class too hard and curve the class average to a C. Because C is average, the class average in my physics second course was a 29 before the professor curved our grades. 29. I got a 3700th on my final, which was curved up to a B. If achieving a 37% success rate is somehow equivalent to a B, that's a failure of the course, not the student. Is there some bizarro physics teaching pedagogy enforced all across America? Every college physics course it heard of, including the ones I took, are the same. The class average is like 35%, which ends up being a B or something ridiculous. Why is it thought like this? Mandatory high volume of responses. Get out the science textbooks and work on chapter 5. Activity 1 inch. Proceeds to sit down at their desk to do random sh on their computer. This is my first time teaching, so you'll be my guinea pig. Her test averages were low 50s with no scaling. It was great. The instructor either seems to have trouble speaking in the language in which the class is being taught, or their accent is so thick that it's difficult to understand them. While plenty of people are incredibly knowledgeable about their topic of interest without being great at multiple languages, the fact of the matter is that you're not going to learn much if you're going to have to devote so much of your attention into just figuring out what the instructor is saying. I've had teachers that I just simply couldn't understand due to a language barrier, and in hindsight I should have dropped immediately. I learned that basically, if you can't understand what the teacher is saying, Be prepared to teach yourself a lot of the class. I had an accounting teacher one time who was Chinese, and I remember sitting in that class on the first day scratching my head because I had no idea what she was saying. I looked around, and a lot of the other people had the same look on their faces. The next week I showed up to class, and what was once a classroom of about 40 people was now about 12. I should have known right there to drop, but I didn't. I stuck it out, and a few weeks go by, and it didn't get any better. I got my first test back and completely bombed it. I told myself right then that I was going to have to teach myself the material and that coming to class was pointless. So I taught myself accounting by using the textbook. Since I didn't go to class, I missed all of her pop quizzes, but just told myself I'll make it up on the tests. I only showed up for tests and the final, and lo and behold, I passed the class. This is a serious and common problem. For a previous job I interviewed more than 100 US college students about their academic experience. One of my questions was what they found difficult about learning in college. At least half of them said they had a professor, usually math or statistics or economics, who was hard to understand. They were always a little hesitant about this. I eventually realized that they didn't want to risk sounding racist, which I guess is good. That they are trying hard to be open-minded, but they have a lecturer they can't understand, and they are afraid to say so, because it will sound racist. Not cool. Way too many universities use way too many professors and graduate students who don't speak English at all well, and are cheap or free, and the students suffer. And students don't want to complain for fear of being anti-foreigner/racist. I typically enjoyed going to class and sitting through lectures. It was a good learning environment for me. For my statistics class, though, the teacher had a thick enough accent that I couldn't understand her unless I really focused on interpreting her individual words. When I focused on the individual words, though, I couldn't pay attention to the overall content of what she was talking about. I ended up just ignoring her entirely and using class time to do the class homework by myself. If there was anything I was really stuck on, I went to her office, as she'd get upset with me that a lot of my questions were over topics she thoroughly explained in class, but I'd just kind of shrug and say that I didn't get it. I couldn't think of any possible good ending to explaining that I never understood what the hell she was saying during lectures, and that I thus spent all of class ignoring her entirely. So what else was I to do? I'm currently at UMass Boston. I've had no fewer than 3 teachers like this. 2 were native Chinese with super heavy accents, and 1 was Greek with a poor ability to understand questions asked of him. When they really put down good students for small mistakes. I had an algebra professor in college who once marked almost an entire test I took wrong because I abbreviated units of measurement such as centimeters, feet, etc., instead of spelling out centimeters, feet, etc. All of my answers were correct, but he gave me like a 33% on my test for that. I had to complain to the math department dean, and he had to change my grade. My math teachers would have all complained if I didn't use the abbreviated forms of all of those. WTF. You used a comma instead of a semicolon. Time to euthanize. Jokes on you. The class was semicolon and their importance. Taught by Drive. Punctuation. PhD in semicolonology. There's a huge wait list of students for a different section with a different professor. Oh, and she doesn't speak your native language well enough to communicate the class material. Yes, you will go to class, study for tests, and do all of the bonus projects, but rest assured you'll get the first C of your college career in a damn general education requirement because of her. A prof who is clearly off his meds. Over the course of my 1 month in the class, he was constantly rude and unbelievably condescending to literally everyone. Example, we were on a section talking about multiple sclerosis and how it signals misfire from the brain. A student said, "My cousin has manuscript and says this is how he was told what was happening. Is that correct?" Prof gets red in the face and yells, "I don't care about your cousin with manuscript," and proceeds to rant about how interrupting him with stupid questions is a waste of his time. He never answered the question. During the second week, less than half the class showed up, or a noticeable chunk. He yelled at us, that did show up about how disrespectful it was. Then said we would have to learn this section on our own, and that we would be heavily tested on it. Then stormed out of class. There was no participation mark in the class. Also, he stated at the beginning of the semester that more than 50% of students dropped his course. Our grades consisted of a 40% midterm and a 60% final. I took the midterm before dropping the class. It was the hardest test I have ever taken in my life. He expected us to answer questions that we hadn't been taught. When confronted, he said you should always be applying the course material to future study. Class average on that was 15%. Highest mark was 68%. Next highest was 32%. He doesn't scale. Want to complain? Talk to the head of the department. Surprise. He is head of the department. Hot D can only be held for 2 years. He managed to hold it for 4 due to a loophole or something. No department head wanted to upset him probably. Yes, he had been required by the university to take meds to keep his job. I don't think he ever actually took them. TL. Doctor, if a prof seems like a loony nut job, they probably are. So GTFO of that class. Too much stress for minimal reward. When I was 18 I took a beauty therapy and science class. One of the units we had was business studies. I had previously sat an A-level in business so I still had notes and books left over. We didn't have the usual business teacher because she was signed off sick. Cancer I believe. So instead of getting a qualified teacher in, the department brought in a beauty salon manager who was a B. Knew nothing about teaching, but thought she knew everything about business. First class we have, she's doing the introduce yourself thing. Then she asks who in this class is a Leo. I raise my hand and it's only me. Oh, because in my star signs I always clash with Leos. Sorry. Okay, so we have a crazy B. The class is sat in a stunned silence as I simply say okay cool. The time comes to write the assignment for the class and me being savvy I used my old business class notes and books and hand it in with the biggest smile on my face. Results day. Everyone passes with high marks all except me. She has me up in front of my head tutor for plagiarism and she's clearly copied and pasted all of this from the internet. My head tutor explained that Shaq and Shake has sat a A-level in business, so she should know what she's talking about. My head tutor remarked my paper and passed it with a high merit. I later told her about what was said regarding the star signs and how I felt attacked due to some insignificant fact about my birth sign. Next lesson she announces she's leaving due to my teaching methods being questioned and having a complaint whilst glaring at me. The rest of the class was relieved. If all your professor does is read from the textbook, then drop that class if you can. Sometimes you need it for your major or a time conflict, but if you can, drop it. You know how to read. My name is Konstantin Makarov. I was nuclear physicist in Russia. This course will not be easy, not all will survive, but we can get through together. First words uttered by my differential equations professor. Sounds awesome and hilarious. Yeah, I had something like that, and the guy wouldn't say increase or decrease, just crease. Crease it by. Sure was fun. If you're dropping that class I'm taking your spot. No one will get an A in this course because insert some philosophical highbrow bullshit answer. At my uni they used to brag about how no first year student will ever achieve over 80%, and that the last time someone did manage it, the department heads combed through his work looking for reasons to mark him down. Eventually got him down to 77%. I don't really get the whole we are going to penalize you for working hard thing, and I always felt bad for the guy. That's ridiculous. From my intro to communications professor, I don't believe in the artificially inflated grading system we are experiencing. So I grade on a strict bell curve. There are 25 people in this class, so no matter how well everyone does, some of you are getting an F. You may not care about that inflated grading system, but the job market and grad schools certainly do. Drop that class as soon as it was over. I had a teacher who was proud of how hard the class he taught was. The grades throughout the semester reflected that. Right at the end of the semester, though, everyone got bumped up to an A or B. He wasn't going to punish students' GPAs for taking a hard class, but he wanted people to have a better understanding of how well they were doing in the class throughout the semester. I liked that teacher a lot. I grade on a curve. 1/3 of you will fail this course. My college had a math professor like this, and it really hurt the engineering program. so much that they phased out engineering entirely because of low admission and high dropout rate. He was the only professor who taught a few required courses for engineering, and lots of people just couldn't make it through his class, so they'd either change their major, transfer to a different school, or drop out entirely. I gather there was some reason why the school couldn't fire him, because it had a negative effect on the college in a lot of ways, and he loved it too. I took and failed one of his classes, and he started with "I'm the one they warned you about. I have a novel idea, how about you grade, based on the student's understanding of the material. Fine interesting concept yup. Freshman English teacher for me. 100% is impossible, and even a paper that gets 95% should be so good that I can rub it against an open wound and it should heal the cut. Got a 95 on the first paper after writing about an experience I had in the Philippines because he said his wife was Filipino. I mean, it was an okay paper, but not that good. Yeah, I had a professor that spewed the idea of once you stop just trying to earn an A, you can actually learn something, which I understand in concept. But when his exam averages were under 30% and most of his students trying to get into grad school, earning that A is just as important as actually learning the material. Hated every second of that semester. Most of the time, it's some bullshit class that doesn't have anything to actually do with your major, or actually anyone's major.